好，各位来宾，大家午安。下午的场次将由国际观点出发，我们将探讨现今教育科技在全球的发展。今日非常荣幸能邀请到 Intel 美国总部全球 K12教育事业群总监 Shelly 与会，跟大家来谈谈全球教师专业职能发展与转变的趋势，来分享全球各国国家在教育愿景的形塑与实践。Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Shelly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first visit to Taiwan, and it's a fabulous country that has my very favorite fruit ever, and that's passion fruit. So I just have to share that. I've so enjoyed the food here. I will not be able to fit into my clothes when I go home. So today, I'm going to talk about education transformation for a changing world. And I know, various countries around the world are at various levels of how education is being transformed. Some countries are just starting, while other countries are well on their way. Yeah, I have to do this. So I want you to look at this picture. How many of you in here, when you were in school, public school, elementary school, secondary school, did your classrooms look like these? Raise your hand. Mine did. Raise your hand if that's how you were taught. Okay. Now, how many of you enjoyed that? How many of you felt you learned a lot? Well, I'll rephrase that. You learned a lot that you remembered more than a week after you were taught it. Because I was great at this. I could read a book. I could memorize the facts. I could take the test, do really well. But if the teacher asked me a week later or 2 weeks later, what did I learn? I couldn't tell them. I forgot it. I'm seeing people nod their heads. That is not how we want to educate our children, is it? No. This is how we want to educate our children. We want our kids working together and talking. We want them using all kinds of technology. We want them collaborating and communicating and solving problems. And I gotta tell you this. I took this picture in Brazil. I was going to visit a school in a very poor area, what they call the slums. And we drive up, and there are these two absolutely most adorable little boys sitting on the sidewalk outside of the school after school hours doing work on their computers. Now, my children, when school ended, they did not hang around school. I did not hang around school. How many of you hung around school? No. But when you've got something like this to engage you and to kind of change what education is all about, you kind of stick around school. So, sorry, I didn't realize that was... Anyway, what I'm going to actually talk about today is education transformation and the type of change that needs to take place in education. And it's not just one thing that has to change. It is many things that have to work together for change to work, for change to be positive, and for change to affect our kids in a way that will allow them to be successful in their lifetimes. Oops. Uh-oh. Okay. So, education transformation, and it was interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day who was not in education, and she said, well, do people in education know what you mean when you say education transformation? And I go, some do. But that's part of what we talk about, is what does that mean? So education transformation focuses on delivering a quality education that increases student success. When I go back to this model, what's in the middle? Student success, because that's what it's all about, the kids. So this goal, the goal of delivering a quality education, speaks to everybody. Our government leaders, our parents, our teachers, our students, and our community members. Because what we want to be able to do is educate kids to participate and lead in the 21st century. We want to expand innovation and opportunities for growth, not just for individual kids, but when individual kids are successful like that and connect, that is an opportunity for growth and success of the country as well. We want kids to take on global and local challenges, and we want to make sure they add value to their communities. So, in order to have education transformation be successful, we need to shift the learning paradigm. So on the left, this is those pictures, the first slide I showed. Here is our teacher standing up in front of the class, kind of like this, giving the students the knowledge. So this is what's known as a teacher-centric model. And this is probably when you walk into most classrooms, many classrooms in many countries, this is the model that you see, although it's changing, fortunately. So this here is a transitional teacher-centric model. We still have the teacher up front. Oh, wait, one thing I forgot to mention. In this model, notice where the technology is. It is with the teacher. The teacher may use the technology in very short amount of time. They may use it for kind of showing a PowerPoint, something like that. In a transitional teacher-centered classroom, we have the teacher moving away from this model. They're still up front imparting knowledge, but students have access to technology. Students are collaborating. The teacher is still the leader. The students are still following, but they are starting to move away from just taking in knowledge from the teacher. So it's moving in a positive way. What we want to see is this. This is our student-centric model. And here, students are at the center. They are at the core of the learning. And we've got many things that are helping their knowledge and their education continue. Now, sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, does that mean you don't need teachers? And it's like, oh, no. I'm a former teacher, so you will never hear me say you don't need teachers. You do need teachers. But the role of the teacher shifts from the lecturer to the facilitator. The role of that teacher changes in a way that they help the students manage their learning. They help the students take more control of their learning. And they can really customize the learning experience for these kids in the way that doesn't happen. This is a one-size-fits-all teaching environment. I'm going to teach the same thing to every single one of you in the class. I move to this environment, and that shifts. Because I've got some folks I know who are very visual learners, and I have others who are auditory learners, and I have others that have to touch things. I can see them moving around. They need to touch things. So they take control of how they learn best in a student-centered environment. The transformation changes what students learn and how they learn. And what's really critical in this type of an environment is the technology. Because the students use technology to analyze, to learn, to communicate, to explore. They develop those higher order thinking skills, such as evaluation and critical thinking. The types of things we want our kids to walk out of school being really successful with. We want them to problem solve. We want them to innovate and be creative and work collaboratively and to be able to communicate to a large variety of audiences. This transformed learning environment matches the needs of the 21st century knowledge-based global economy that we find ourselves in today. Oh, that didn't come out very well. So education transformation is clearly more than just technology in the classroom. It's a model that can help a country or a province or a state or a school district move from the traditional or transitional way of teaching to a very transformed environment with the students at the center of learning. So let's look at this model a little bit closer. As I said earlier, student success is the heart of the model of ed transformation. It starts with envisioning all the changes you want to make to help students be successful. As you go forward, you identify those levers that you can move to achieve your goals and your vision. So this helps you think about how you can use education reform with other government initiatives to achieve the biggest impact. And you know something? We have to remember that being successful means more than just test scores. There's such an emphasis on test scores and competing for the best test scores. But that's not necessarily the best indicator of being successful. There's other things, such as the rates of graduation, the rates of attendance, of the enrollment in some countries of girls in school, because that is a global issue in many parts of the world. The reduction of dropouts, the high level of student engagement, because when students are engaged, they learn. When they're not engaged, they don't, or they learn enough to pass the test. And a decrease in behavior problems, which then allows a teacher to focus on helping all the students all the time. So within the model, we've got some pieces within the circle, and we've got 2 rings around the outside that really encompass everything. So the first one I'm going to talk about is leadership. It absolutely takes effective leadership to achieve major change. Leaders, whether that is a principal, a superintendent within a district, the state department or provincial department head of education, or in some cases the federal people who are in charge of education, they need to establish a long-term vision. They need to communicate it very clearly. They need to inspire teachers, parents, community members, funding bodies, and any other stakeholder that is involved in this change. Effective leaders align education transformation goals with larger national objectives. So a leader must also develop a long-term roadmap and a master plan, because if they think in short visions, nothing will change. It has to be long-term, which encompasses short-term goals and medium-term goals, but really the bigger picture is the long-term goals. And it's not just creating the goals, but it's being able to execute the plan. So the second circle is policy. It is absolutely critical to have an effective policy framework that creates the conditions for success. If you put technology into a classroom and you do not change the policy, you have a recipe for failure. Effective policy is critical to establish the conditions for success and enable that transformation. So the policy framework has to think about things such as aligning the curriculum and assessment, which needs to change. If we're going for kids who are critical thinkers and problem solvers and collaborators, your curriculum and assessment better reflect that. The policy changes need to identify teacher professional development, and I'm going to come back to that because that's actually my specialty. It has to involve teaching and learning practices and technology all working together to support the transformation objectives. So for example, a very simple little policy change could be redefining what a textbook is to include digital resources, or expand the definition of what a course is, because a course can be now students taking advantage of virtual learning environments and teachers benefiting from flexible, just-in-time teacher professional development. Practical policies have to be implemented to protect students, such as acceptable use policies. Now, acceptable use policies have been around for a long time, but these days they have to differ. They have to reflect the norms of the community as well as the realities of the 21st century. So I'm going to talk about each of the little pieces in the center here. And I'm not starting at the top because I'm going to end with that, but I'm going to talk about curriculum and assessment. Curriculum standards have to ensure that students gain the skills and knowledge to succeed in a fast-changing global economy, that they become effective citizens, and they actively contribute to their community. Curriculum must also encompass the social and emotional aspects of learning, and it absolutely has to enable students to be the ones to lead their communities as 21st century citizens. So curriculum changes from learning the facts to covering skills such as collaborative problem solving and critical thinking. Because frankly, do I need to know the dates of the world wars? No. I need to be able to know how to find information and use that information, not memorize that information. Curriculum standards, actually, let me tell you a little story, because I love this story. So when my older son was in his first year of high school, the teachers, they didn't have technology in the classrooms, but they had a couple of computer labs at the school. And my son had an assignment. It was in his history, social studies class, and they had to do a country report. They had to pick another country from around the world and do a report. So I said to him, he said to me, "Oh, Mom, I handed in my country report today. It was on PowerPoint." I said, "Great." But this was a while ago, okay, when kids did use PowerPoint. And I said to him, I said, "So Matt, what did you learn?" And he looked at me. I don't know if you know the expression, like a deer in the headlights. And I looked at him. And I said, "Matthew." "Yes, Mom." "You copied and pasted off of Wikipedia, didn't you?" "Yes, Mom." But I couldn't blame him totally. Yes, I did blame him. And I said to him, I said, "You know, Matt, at least when I was in school and had that same country report, and I copied it out of the encyclopedia, I had to write it. So at least I learned something." But it was a reflection of the curricular standards, which were still very fact-based. So I went into this school and I talked to his teacher very nicely, and I kind of told her what happened between my son and I. And this was her first experience with technology. And she really didn't have much training. So what she was doing was substituting a PowerPoint for the exact same assignment that she would have had them do without the technology. No different, same assignment. And I talked to her about that, about how technology, if used inappropriately, can lead to less learning. And that she was ahead of the change of the curricular standards, which, by the way, have now changed. But how could she redesign that activity so that kids had to think about their country report and not be able to copy and paste it? So I didn't want to tell her. I wanted her to come up with it. So she said, "Well, what if I had them compare and contrast that country with our country?" And I said, "Perfect. They can't copy and paste and not know what they're doing. They have to analyze it and come up with some results, some answers." So she revised that for the following year. But if our curriculum doesn't change, the technology is not going to help that education transformation. Fortunately, curriculum standards are changing worldwide, everywhere I go. And they really should promote the use of digital content and tools and resources, because high quality digital resources absolutely engage students in active learning, provide deeper learning experiences, and expand that teacher's ability to meet the diverse needs of the kids in that classroom. But along with changing curriculum, you have to change the assessment also. It is not just about the test at the end of the lesson or the unit. With technology, students and teachers can get real-time feedback right away. They can see what needs to change. There's an amazing amount of data that can help an educator personalize a learning experience for kids that will allow them to be successful. So the next piece of the wheel is the information and communications technology, or as we know that, ICT. So ICT really provides essential tools and resources to help educators create that student-centered 21st century environment that we want for our kids. These kids, or this environment, they use PCs, laptops, tablets, smartphones. It doesn't really matter what it is. Very much learning anytime, anywhere these days with high quality education software. And I'm saying high quality education software because we all know that there are a million apps out there, right? Educational apps. There's a million of them. 999,000 of them are craps. And I do not want my child spending time with these apps. So we need high quality resources. We need good broadband access, because if we don't have that, it takes away from that bigger experience of being able to collaborate and communicate beyond the four walls of the classroom. We need a robust infrastructure, and that infrastructure might include a private cloud service just for the school, or a public cloud service that has many resources together with it. The next piece of the puzzle is sustainable resourcing. This is absolutely critical, that because transformation requires more than a one-time infusion of technology. If we do not fund for a sustainable environment where folks can come in, make the fixes that need to happen, do the refreshes when we need the refreshes, upgrade the resources when we need the resources, then there is no need to put the technology into the classrooms in the first place. That sustainable resourcing is critical. That long-term sustainability is absolutely necessary if we're going to see education transformation. The next piece of the puzzle is research and evaluation. Because as any educator knows, the first time you do something is not perfect. It's never perfect. Actually, it doesn't matter how many times you do it, it's never perfect. And each time you implement something, you evaluate it. You see what worked well, what didn't work, what is happening in other places, what are the other theories, how can I change what I have done to make it better, to implement better, to have better student success, to make those informed decisions to move forward so that our vision can be met. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is actually near and dear to my heart because, as I said, I am a former teacher, and that's the professional development. There is nothing that will kill a technology integration experience more than not training your teachers. There is nothing scarier to a teacher than to give a piece of technology to every student in the classroom and not have training on how do I manage that? How do my lessons have to change? What should I be doing, and how can I take advantage of this technology? It is not intuitive to 90% of the teachers. We all have those teachers who have it innately in them to explore and be able to be successful on their own. But that's not the norm. And teacher professional development is critical for the success of education transformation. It can empower teachers to use new solutions, new tools, but most importantly, new approaches. Because what we don't want to see is teachers teaching the same way. We want them to change their teaching practices as well. So, when you think about the attributes of a 21st century teacher, a 21st century teacher will inspire students to learn, to be creative, and to innovate. They engage students with digital tools so that students can explore real-world problems. You know, back when I was in the classroom, I used technology back in the not the early 90s, the mid to late 90s with my students. I was one of the innovators in my school district, and I was lucky enough to have scraped together 8 computers for my classroom. And back then, that was a lot. And I had a smart board and a projector, and I had to beg, borrow, but I did not steal for any of this. And when I first started teaching, though, with this technology, I didn't make the changes right away. It took me a number of years. And every year, I did more and new professional development to help me move my practices. And I really found when I got to this point of having students tackle real-world problems, that's when I saw education transformation in my classroom. But it didn't come easy. And I had to do, this was 3 to 5 years into my transformation, that I felt really comfortable with what I was doing. That I became a 21st century teacher. And I was a pretty good teacher, but I wasn't quite there yet. 21st century teacher designs, develops, and evaluates digital age learning experience and assessments. You know, one of the things that I see so often going into a classroom is teachers using digital resources that are not appropriate for the task or the age of the student. 21st century teacher promotes and models digital citizenship, and most importantly, a 21st century teacher engages in continual professional development. It isn't a chore for them. If we as educators do not model lifelong learning, then we should not be educators, because that's what we want our students to do, is be lifelong learners, and that's what we need to model. So, technology is driving new ways of teaching and learning. It takes 5 to 6 years, 5 to 6 years for teachers to master technology integration. So as policymakers, as school leaders, you cannot expect to see a change in student outcomes from year 1 to year 2, 5 to 6 years. And teachers with 49 hours of professional development can show an amazing amount of increase in student achievement, about 21%. When teachers are coached through the process, about 95% of them develop the skills needed to be able to work with Web 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, wherever we are in the world, with social networking, with online tools, and with classroom management. So the bottom line is technology plus trained teachers is what equals significant gains for students in all subject areas. So how many of you have heard of the SAMR model of technology integration? Anybody here? Really? Ah, okay. Well, this was developed by a professor in Brazil. And it's 4 different levels of integrating technology into the classroom. And this is very research-based of what he and his colleagues have found over the last, I think it's like 10 years, 10, 15 years of what goes on. The beginning is substitution. That's where technology is a tool that substitutes with no functional change. So, for example, teacher may have their students using a word processor to type a paper. But then the students print it out and hand it in. No functional change. They're using technology as a typewriter. The second level, and this is where many teachers start because they don't know any different until they've had good professional development. The second level is augmentation. Here, technology is a tool substitute with some improvement. So we're moving. We'll have students still use word processing, but with spell check, they may cut and paste. They will still print it and hand it in, but they have used slightly advanced features of the technology. It's not just a typewriter, but it's doing grammar and spelling check as well. The next level is modification. Here, technology allows for significant lesson redesign. And that's what has to happen with teachers and technology. It's a whole new ballgame. They need to redesign how they teach and what they're teaching. So here, technology allows for teachers to integrate things such as email, graphs, images, spreadsheets, different things like that, where they're adding those things to enhance and show their understanding and knowledge of, say, a lab in a science class. And then the last part is redefinition. And this is where technology allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable without the technology. So for example, if I have my students doing research on a science issue, they can integrate movies, hot links, software, apps, simulations, where things can be manipulated. They Skype with experts. They compare. They combine results in wikis. And they publish worldwide what they've done to see if it could be replicated elsewhere. You can't do that without the technology. You cannot bring in the experts. You cannot bring in the simulations. You cannot do the type of deep learning that you get at that top row. And this is where we want teachers to move. 3 to 5 years, guys. 3 to 5 years from here to here of continuous teacher professional development. So, speaking of teacher professional development, I'm actually going to share some of the things that Intel has created for teachers. We've been very fortunate to have touched over 12 million teachers in over 35 countries and 23 languages around the world. It's been my honor to work with this program and see the shift in education practices that are happening in the classroom because of our teacher professional development courses. We've got a series of e-learning courses called the Intel Teach Elements series that address topics such as project-based approaches, assessment in a 21st century classroom. You know, earlier I said assessment practices have to change. It's not just the test at the end. It's not just the formative assessment at the beginning either. But if we're going to be teaching 21st century skills, it's being able to assess critical thinking, to be able to assess collaborative efforts, to be able to assess problem solving, things that are known as soft skills. And this helps teachers get there. I think worldwide there's a STEM issue of not having enough kids coming out of universities in the STEM subjects. We have a class called Inquiry in the Science Classroom that helps teachers understand what true inquiry is so that they can engage their students and hopefully help them become more open to a career in the STEM fields. We've got a course called Collaboration in the Digital Classroom that really helps teachers understand all the different tools that are out there to help when it comes to collaboration. Thinking critically with data. When we think, and this is not about data teachers use, this is about data for students to analyze. The world is a data set, and kids have to understand how to use that data to come up with solutions to problems. Designing blended learning. I imagine here, teachers are starting to move into the anytime, anywhere type of learning environment, where they're not just teaching inside the four walls of the classroom, but they may be doing a flipped classroom model, or they may be doing something where they have the students working outside of the classroom and learning how to design learning within that blended environment. And we've got 2 courses that focus on moving into mobile learning. You know, earlier, just a little while ago, I said, it's a whole new ballgame for teachers when you put a computer in front of every kid. Guess what? It's a whole new ballgame when you put mobile devices in front of teachers. And it's not just the fact that the device is different. Like, honestly, a lot of teachers don't realize, oh, I can't have my students saved to their mobile device the way I did to the PC. I don't have ports to give them a flash drive or to attach them to the projector or to do the multitudes of things that they were planning. It's a swipe. Oh, how do I get rid of Windows 8.1 stuff? It's a whole different environment. It's a learning anytime, anywhere. How do I redesign my lessons so that kids can go home and continue to learn and communicate with each other, if it's even simple things through texting on their telephone? How am I using things such as, actually the programs that our kids use? I was talking about this earlier this morning. Teachers having their kids use Twitter. Twitter is huge with students worldwide now. So what is my purpose for using Twitter? Do I want them to learn how to summarize? Because in a tweet, they can only do so many characters. And that's a skill to be able to say what they need to say in a short amount of words. Do I want them to take a look around when they're out on the weekend and tweet about 3 things that apply to the physics lesson we learned this past week. So these are the types of things that you learn about in the moving into mobile course and the creativity in the mobile classroom. You know, there's been a fair amount of teacher professional development around on collaboration, on communication. There is not much on creativity. So this is actually our newest course, and it just came out not too long ago, just a few months ago. So we're pretty pleased with it. Oop. Oh, wrong way. We have a number of face-to-face courses that have been our standards for years. These are the courses that help teachers get started with technology. We've got, it's called Getting Started, because it really is about teachers who have no technology experience starting to learn how to use the technology in ways that help their productivity. We've got the Essential course, which really helps teachers learn those first steps of technology integration. We have a course called Advanced Online that helps teachers build communities and learn through learning paths. We've got an amazing course called Thinking with Technology, which uses our online thinking tools that help students analyze, prioritize, evaluate, use those higher order thinking skills that you know of from Bloom's taxonomy. And we've got, as a critical, again, a leadership forum in a face-to-face environment. These are all face-to-face courses. The Elements courses can be online, face-to-face, or blended. We have another series of courses that took a different focus. Initially, the original courses on the slide before were very much focused towards teachers who have a computer lab in their school and are taking their students to the computer lab. These transforming learning courses are really much more focused on the infusion of technology into every classroom. One-to-one environments require a new way of teaching. Our learning with one-to-one really helps teachers evaluate their practices, what needs to change, and then they start redesigning lessons based on lots of exemplars and talking and examples and synthesis of what they do. We've got a course called Student Engagement with One-to-One. You know, once you engage students in their learning, I almost don't know how to finish that sentence, because it is the most heartwarming experience when you see your kids walking out of the classroom excited about what they just learned, wanting to continue to learn on their way to the next class, on the bus going home, sharing with their parents. But so many of us, or teachers, just don't understand the components of engaging lessons. And this course helps them get there. I mentioned tablets. We've got a very short course, it's 6 hours, about an introduction to tablets in the classroom. And it really is an in-depth look on how do you work with tablets? How do you manage that? How, again, do you redesign and assess learning in a tablet environment? And then our newest course that just came out yesterday is called Digital Learning Fundamentals. And many years ago, when we first started designing technology integration courses for teachers, many teachers in the countries we went to did not have any experience with technology at all. Today, that's different. Most people worldwide at least have a smartphone. So they're used to working with technology in some sort of a form factor. This course is really an in-depth look at integrating digital tools to promote 21st century learning at a beginning level. So these are our teacher professional development courses that we have the pleasure of working with educators around the world as part of that piece of the education transformation model. So we've got a couple case studies that I'm just going to share very quickly about how education transformation has occurred in some countries. The first one is Argentina. And in Argentina, there was a presidential mandate that aligned with the federal vision of giving students giving out 3 million computers to secondary students in public schools across the nation. And it is actually one of the biggest deployments of technology to date. They worked on every piece of that puzzle. They had policy changes. They had curriculum and assessment where they not only changed the curriculum, but they identified and adapted over 50,000 online educational resources for students. Their professional development used our courses, and they had 150 master teachers. We use a train-the-trainer model that reached 19,000 teachers working within this environment of 3 million computers rolled out. Their ICT, they were given the Intel Classmate computers, and they had a sustainable model to make sure they had the support, that it worked, and that it continued to work. And they continued to do research and evaluation so that as they continue to roll out more technology, they're learning from the initial rollouts. I skipped that one. I'm going to go to Brazil. Brazil has done, again, an amazing rollout of technology where they did something a little bit different. They didn't just bring in the technology from vendors outside of Brazil, but what they did is they invested in the country in creating an ICT economy for others to invest in and job creation. So there was over 650 jobs that were created as this technology was rolled out to the schools in Pernambuco state. It really was a grassroots model. It was the first time they've tried anything like that. And their pilots have shown increased outcomes of student learning, and they are continuing to evaluate and improve as they work with local solution providers in getting technology out to the students. In Sunnyside, Arizona, you think of the US, you don't think of issues such as dropout rates or that students aren't being educated. But Sunnyside, Arizona is very close to the border of Mexico, and there's a lot of immigrant kids who go to this specific school district. And they had a major dropout issue in that school. And they knew they had to do something. 83% of their students were low income. And the school was actually known as the dropout factory across the state. And I don't know about you, but if I was the leader of that school, I would not want that label put on me. So they launched a project called Project Graduation. And it was a multi-phase, research-based effort that prevented dropout rates and increase graduation. And what they did is they brought in technology. So I guess in a sense, they started off by bribing students. And what they did, it was a great idea. Students, incoming freshmen, so first-year students coming into the school, were awarded a computer at the end of the first semester if they met certain criteria. And that criteria included grades, it included attendance, and it included participation. And then as they continued to bring in computers for each of the students, the teachers started integrating that into their lessons in a way that engaged these kids and made them want to come to school. And when you are dubbed a dropout factory and you go from 505 students graduating to 873 because of the ed transformation model that involved bringing in the technology, training the teachers, changing the curriculum and assessment, having a sustainable model, that is a model of success. In Sweden, you know, interestingly enough, you don't think that there's issues in a lot of the mature market countries, but there definitely is. So in Sweden, they decided to use technology to achieve both short and long-term range objectives. They wanted to improve writing scores and reading of the younger students, because when younger students improve their reading and writing, research shows that their performance in all other subject areas improves. So they brought in the technology and used that technology to help the kids improve their language arts scores. And you can see here that their scores improved by 20%, which is pretty darn significant. Their math scores improved by 17%. Very significant when you look at typical student test scores and how they change year from year or don't, or from beginning of year to end of year, when taught in a traditional non-technology environment. And then lastly is the Klein, Texas school district that's near Houston, Texas. They were very aggressive in their desire to integrate technology into the classrooms because they really wanted to engage their students and make sure that those kids were ready for the 21st century. So what they did is they made sure that all students had access to technology tools by equipping each K-12 classroom with technology. These were kids could not take the computers home, but every classroom was full of technology. The district provided course after course after course of teacher professional development to help teachers shift their teaching practices. And they did something that, they did something the right way that many places don't do. They gave the teachers their computers a full year before the students got computers. And that full year before the students got the computers, they were working with the teachers on how they were going to adapt and adjust their lessons for when the technology is brought in. Too often, the teachers get the computers the same day the students do. And nothing changes for too long, for a long period of time, because it takes that time for the teachers to think about change. So Klein did that. They did their one-to-one initiative, and in that school district, they started with one school, and every year they added another, and another, until the entire school district was in a one-to-one environment with all the pieces of the Ed Transformation model put into place. A wonderful success story. And that's all I have to share with you today. I think all of us here obviously have a passion for making sure students are successful. And the way we want to make sure they are is through technology, because we believe in what it can do. So all I can say is if you have questions, again, on teacher professional development, we're here. Rachel, who's here in the country, can answer any questions. And I wish everybody reaches the goals that they have for their students and for their teachers. And thank you.
Thank you.